Tell Washington to send an army. The enemy commander laughed, pressing his boot into the neck of a captured American SEAL. Tell them all 6 are mine now. He radioed his men across the fortified compound, 40 fighters, heavy weapons, mountain walls on every side. He believed no force on earth would dare come. He believed he had already won. He had no idea that 40 miles away, a woman in a grease-stained uniform had just read 3 words on a screen she had not touched in over a year, and without hesitation, without calling anyone, without asking permission, she quietly set down her wrench and began to move. If you believe the most dangerous people are the ones nobody sees coming, subscribe right now, drop a comment with the city you're watching from, and follow this story all the way to the end. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter had a rule she lived by, and it was simple enough that she could have written it on the back of a grease rag. Never be the most interesting person in the room. She had followed that rule for 3 years, 4 months, and 11 days. Not that she was counting, because counting would have meant she was waiting for something. And Emily Carter was not supposed to be waiting for anything. She was supposed to be done with all of that. She was supposed to be finished. That was what she told herself every morning, when she pulled on her uniform every afternoon, when she crawled under a busted axle every night, when she washed the engine grease off her hands with the kind of industrial soap that smelled like turpentine and institutional indifference. She was just a mechanic. That was the story. That was the armor. Forward Operating Base Redstone sat on the edge of an Arizona plateau, but its reach extended 12 time zones away to a tactical support division operating in terrain that no tourist map would ever show. The base itself was ordinary the way all military installations are ordinary flat buildings, chain link fencing, the constant smell of diesel and burned coffee, and the particular kind of exhaustion that settles into people who have been responsible for keeping other people alive. 3,000 personnel moved through its corridors, its motor pool, its operations center on any given day. Soldiers in full kit jogged past soldiers in PT gear. Officers with coffee mugs debated logistics with sergeants who had not slept. Everybody had somewhere to be. Emily's somewhere was always the same. The motor pool at the south end of the base was her entire world, and she had arranged it that way deliberately. A long rectangular space housing 32 vehicles in various states of function and dysfunction. 2 hydraulic lifts, shelving units loaded with parts and fluid containers, and tools she had organized with the same methodical precision she used to organize everything else in her life. There was a radio in the corner that played country music during the day and went silent at night. There was a coffee maker that had not worked properly in 6 months, and Emily kept it that way intentionally because fixing it would have required her to care about coffee. And caring about coffee was the kind of thing that led to other kinds of caring, and other kinds of caring had a way of becoming liabilities. The soldiers who came to her with broken vehicles saw exactly what she wanted them to see. A woman in her mid-30s, capable, quiet, competent in the specific, unglamorous way of someone who is good at one thing and has accepted that one thing as the totality of her existence. Her hands were always dark with grease under the nails. Her hair was always pulled back with whatever she had available, a rubber band, a zip tie, once a piece of electrical wire. She did not make conversation beyond what the job required. She did not socialize in the mess hall unless someone sat down next to her and initiated, and even then her responses were short, factual, and pleasant, in the way that a weather report is pleasant. She remembered everyone's name. She remembered nothing that required her to be memorable. Carter at the soldiers called her, not Sergeant Carter, just Carter, the way you'd refer to a trustworthy piece of equipment. She was fine with that. She was better than fine with that. Carter the Humvee on grid 6 won't turn over. Carter the generator feeding the comm tower is making a sound it shouldn't. Carter, I need this truck running in 45 minutes, or the colonel is going to make me wish I'd joined the Air Force. She handled all of it with the same calm efficiency. Listened, diagnosed, fixed. Never once made anyone feel stupid for not knowing what she knew. Never once betrayed anything beneath the surface. The motor pool was her stage, and she performed the role of ordinary soldier with the dedication of someone whose life depended on the performance being believed. Because it did. The night everything changed started the same way every other night started. Emily was alone in the motor pool after 2,200 hours, which was not unusual. She often stayed late, not because she was assigned to, not because there was paperwork demanding it, but because the evenings were the only time the base truly went quiet, and quiet was the condition she trusted most. In the quiet, she could think. In the quiet, nothing surprised her. She was lying on her back beneath a utility truck, tracing a brake fluid line that had developed a slow leak when she heard the distant change in the base's sound frequency. Not an alarm, not a siren, something more subtle than that, the particular shift in human movement and communication that she had spent years learning to recognize the sound of people moving with purpose instead of routine, the sound of something happening. She stayed under the truck. She continued working. Because the first rule of not being the most interesting person in the room was not running toward interesting things. 20 minutes later, Private First Class Tomas Reyes came jogging into the motor pool with the specific energy of someone who had heard something important and could not decide whether sharing it was appropriate or irresistible. Tomas was 22 years old and had been assigned to the motor pool as Emily's assistant for the past 8 months. He was from Corpus Christi, Texas. He called his mother every Sunday. He was afraid of spiders and did not like when people pointed that out. Emily knew all of these things the way she knew the torque specifications on every vehicle she worked on, precisely, practically, and without judgment. Sergeant Carter. He stopped at the edge of the lift. He was breathing like he had been running. "You hear anything?" Emily rolled out from under the truck. She looked at him once, looked at his face, processed the information his expression was offering. "Tell me," she said. "I overheard something in the comm center." He lowered his voice even though they were alone. "Something about a SEAL team. They're saying 6 guys are missing, that they got hit." Emily set down her wrench, not fast, not slow. She set it down with the same deliberateness she did everything. "Which team?" "I don't know. I couldn't hear everything, but it sounded bad, Sergeant. It sounded really bad." "Go home, Reyes," she said, "but it's not our concern. Go home." He hesitated. I was the kind of young man who hesitated before he listened, which was something Emily respected, even when it inconvenienced her. Finally, he nodded, pulled on his jacket, walked back toward the barracks. Emily stood in the middle of the motor pool for a long moment. The brake fluid line, the utility truck, the country music station that had gone off the air 2 hours ago. Then she walked to the back of the motor pool to the equipment storage room she had requested be assigned solely to her maintenance department inventory. The request had been approved 14 months ago by a logistics officer who had been far too busy to wonder why a maintenance sergeant needed a private storage space. Nobody had entered it since except her. She unlocked it with a key that did not appear on any base inventory list. Inside were shelves of what appeared to be standard maintenance supplies. Oil filters, hydraulic fluid, electrical components, the kind of organized mediocrity that made eyes slide right past it. She moved to the back shelf, pushed aside a crate of air filters, pressed a sequence against the wall panel that she had not pressed in over a year. The compartment opened. Inside was a device. She had not powered it on in 14 months. She picked it up, pressed the power sequence. The screen lit up. There was one message, 3 words. Protocol Valkyrie activated. She sat down on a crate of oil filters. She read those 3 words 5 times, not because she did not understand them, but because she needed to be absolutely sure that she was not manufacturing meaning from nothing, not projecting, not allowing the sound of that shift in the base's atmosphere to create something in her mind that was not really there. Protocol Valkyrie. She had not heard those words in 3 years. She had hoped with the particular desperate hope of someone who has decided to want ordinary things that she would never hear them again. The device vibrated. A follow-up message loaded. 6 SEAL operators. Operation Silent Horizon. Last known coordinates. Captured. Enemy strength estimated at 40 fighters. Fortified position. Mountainous terrain. Conventional rescue assessed as high risk to hostages. She read the coordinates. She knew the terrain from satellite briefings she had memorized 3 years ago during a different life. She scrolled further. At the bottom of the message, a single line that had not appeared in any communication she had received since her reassignment. Your call. She stared at those 2 words for a very long time. Your call. In 3 years of repairing engines, nobody had ever told her something was her call. She was given work orders. She was given vehicle assignments. She was told which trucks needed to be ready by which hour. Your call was not a phrase that belonged to the woman everyone knew as Carter the mechanic. But Protocol Valkyrie did not belong to Carter, the mechanic, either. It belonged to someone else. Someone she had worked very hard to forget she was. She locked the compartment. She walked back through the motor pool. She picked up the wrench she had set down and she stood there holding it, and she had a conversation with herself that nobody would ever know about, in the way that the most important conversations a person ever has are the ones that happen in complete silence. She thought about the 6 men somewhere in those mountains, SEAL operators, people who had entered hostile territory trusting the system around them, trusting that if something went wrong, somebody would come. Somebody always came. That was the covenant. You did not leave people behind. She thought about the 40 enemy fighters between those 6 men in safety. She thought about the conventional rescue assessment. High risk to hostages. She had read enough of those assessments to translate the language. It meant that a direct assault, even with superior forces, introduced too many variables that ended with Americans dying in a building that had probably been rigged to complicate rescue. She thought about the 3 words on the screen. Protocol Valkyrie, your call. She set the wrench down again. This time it made a different sound when it hit the workbench. Not the sound of a tool being set aside, the sound of a decision being made. She had been recruited into the classified unit 11 years ago when she was 24 years old and had recently completed Ranger School as part of a pilot evaluation program that never received official recognition because the Army was not yet ready to process what the results had shown. She had been approached not by someone in a formal uniform, but by a woman in civilian clothes who had sat down across from her in a diner outside Fort Benning and ordered coffee and said without preamble, "You're bored." Emily had said, "Ma'am," and the woman had said, "Not with the Army, not with the work. Bored in here." She tapped the center of her chest. "Because you're doing things that should be hard and they're not hard enough, and you can't tell anyone that because it sounds like arrogance, but it isn't arrogance. It's just data. And I'm here because we have work that matches the data." Emily had listened. She had said yes. What followed were 4 years of training and operational deployment that she could not describe to anyone in the world who had not been cleared to hear them. She had learned to move through environments that were actively hostile in ways that conventional soldiers were not trained to survive. She had learned the art of being underestimated, not as a defensive posture, but as a weapon. She had learned that the most effective operator was often the one who had been completely dismissed by the opposition before the operation began. She had run missions on 3 continents. She had recovered intelligence assets from positions that conventional forces could not have reached. She had walked into buildings that should have been impossible to walk into, completed objectives that analysts had classified as unreachable, and walked back out again without anyone being able to explain how it happened. Her operational call sign was Shadow. Not because she was stealthy, though she was, but because of something her unit commander had said during an early debrief. He had said, "You're not there until you decide to be there. And by the time the enemy knows, you decided it's already done." That's not being a soldier, Carter. That's being a shadow. She had not hated the name. Then came the mission that changed everything. She would not let herself think about it in full. That was a rule she had established for herself in the early months after her reassignment, and she had kept it the way she kept the motor pool organized, with discipline, with routine, with the understanding that some things needed to be behind a locked door for functional reasons. What she allowed herself to know was the outcome. The mission had been compromised at a level that was never fully explained to her. Assets had been lost. The operation had resulted in outcomes that nobody had wanted. Emily had survived. Others had not. The debrief had lasted 9 days. At the end of it, she had been offered 2 options. Option 1 was a full exit from service with a record that would not accurately describe what she had done or what had been done to her. Option 2 was what they called reassignment, a cover position, somewhere she could exist without existing, somewhere she could be useful in ways that did not require her to be visible, somewhere she could heal from something that nobody was going to officially acknowledge she needed to heal from. She had chosen option 2. She had chosen the motor pool. She had chosen Carter over Shadow. And for 3 years and 4 months and 11 days, she had to believe she had made the right choice. She went back to the storage room. She reopened the compartment. Inside, beside the communication device, were items she had not touched since the day she had placed them there. She looked at them for a long moment. Then she sent a single response to the message on the device. "Understood. Proceeding independently. Do not send additional assets. This is cleaner alone. She did not wait for a reply. She knew the protocol. Sending the response was not a request for permission. It was a notification. Protocol Valkyrie did not require command approval for individual operator action. That was the entire point of Protocol Valkyrie. It existed for situations where conventional approval chains were too slow, too visible, or too compromised to be useful. She had helped write the protocol. She began preparing. I knew the sound of every engine on that base, the way musicians know instruments, not from study, but from proximity. The vehicle leaving was the old maintenance truck, the one that had been assigned to Carter's unit for parts runs, and had a specific rattle in the rear differential that Carter kept saying she was going to fix and never quite got around to. He sat up in his bunk. Something about the hour felt wrong. Something about the sound of that engine in that darkness felt like a question he was not sure he wanted the answer to. He almost got up. He almost went to see. Instead, he lay back down. He told himself it was none of his business. He told himself Sergeant Carter probably had a reason. He stared at the ceiling for 40 minutes before he fell asleep. He would think about that decision later and wonder what it said about him that he had trusted her enough not to ask. The gate guard on duty was a specialist named Kowalski, who had been awake for 6 hours and had another 6 to go, and who registered the vehicle, verified the driver's identification, noted the destination logged as a parts retrieval at a depot 40 miles east, and waved the truck through with the practiced efficiency of someone whose job had become automatic. He did not think twice about it. Why would he? Carter's trucks went out all the time. Carter ran parts runs at odd hours when supply chains required it. Carter was the mechanic. Mechanics kept strange hours. That was a known thing. The truck disappeared into the dark. Kowalski poured himself coffee from a thermos. Emily drove with no radio. The maintenance truck's cab was full of silence, and she used that silence the way she used most things efficiently. She ran through everything she knew. She built a picture in her mind from the coordinates, from the terrain she had studied, from the enemy strength assessment. 40 fighters, fortified position, 6 hostages, mountains. She worked the problem. Because that was what mechanics did. They did not panic about a broken engine. They identified the failure points. They understood the system. They found the place where the system had gone wrong, and they applied pressure there. This was not so different. This was just a more complicated engine. She thought about the SEAL commander. She had not been given his name, but she had been given enough. 6 operators. Their last known position had shown signs of an ambush, which meant they had been hit while moving, which meant the enemy had known they were coming, which meant the enemy's intelligence was better than American planning had accounted for. That told her something important. The enemy was confident. Confident enemies made predictable mistakes. Confident enemies stopped checking the things they believed were already secure. She drove. The mountains in the distance were dark shapes against a sky full of stars, and she watched them the way she watched everything, with the particular quality of attention that most people never developed, the kind that did not interpret, but simply received, took in data without filtering it through expectation. She was not the mechanic anymore. She had not been the mechanic since she read 3 words on a screen. She did not know exactly what she was yet. She was becoming it. That was enough. 50 miles away in the operations center at Forward Redstone, the situation was deteriorating. Colonel Marcus Briggs had been awake since 0100 hours and was operating on the particular clarity that comes from adrenaline overriding exhaustion. He was 51 years old, 30 years in service, and he had seen bad situations before. This one qualified. "Talk to me," he said to his intelligence officer. Captain Delaney spread the satellite imagery across the table. She was 29, Georgetown education, spoke 4 languages, and had learned in the past 18 months that the gap between academic intelligence and operational reality was the kind of gap you fell into if you did not pay attention. "The facility is here," she pointed. "Former mining infrastructure repurposed. They've fortified the main structure. We can see weapon emplacements here and here. The entry points are here and here, both heavily guarded. There are patrol patterns on a rotation we've been able to map from overhead surveillance, but the rotations are irregular enough that conventional insertion would be detected before it reached the perimeter. Rescue options. A helicopter assault on the main structure gives us the best odds for hostage recovery, but the tactical assessment is, she hesitated. Concerning, sir, the building has been rigged. If we go loud before we have the hostages secured and mobile, we're looking at outcomes we don't want to talk about. Briggs stared at the image. What about a ground approach? Single-file insertion through the eastern ridge is theoretically possible, but requires 6 to 8 hours of approach time in terrain that offers limited cover. By dawn, the situation changes significantly. If the enemy decides to move the hostages, they'll move them before dawn, Briggs said, not as a question. Delaney nodded. That's the assessment. The room was quiet, then Briggs asked almost to himself, "Where's my maintenance sergeant?" Delaney looked up. "Sir," he shook his head. "Nothing. Get me Washington on a secure line. We need to talk about options." He did not tell her that in 30 years of service, the only time he had ever been briefed on Protocol Valkyrie was during a classified training exercise that had classified itself so thoroughly that his notes had been confiscated at the door. He did not tell her that 20 minutes ago he had received a notification that Protocol Valkyrie had been activated. He did not tell her what that meant. He did not tell anyone. He looked at the satellite image of 40 fighters in a fortified mountain position. He looked at the clock. He thought about a woman in a grease-stained uniform. And Colonel Marcus Briggs, 30 years of service, multiple combat deployments, a man not given to anything resembling mysticism, did something he had never done in a professional capacity. He decided to trust something he could not explain. He ordered his rescue planning team to continue their assessments, but he did not deploy anyone. He waited. She shut off the engine. She sat in the silence. She thought about Tomas Reyes and his Sunday phone calls to his mother in Corpus Christi. She thought about Specialist Kowalski at the gate, drinking bad coffee, counting down hours. She thought about the soldier she had been before the motor pool. She thought about the 9-day debrief. She thought about the woman in civilian clothes who had sat down across from her in a diner outside Fort Benning and said, "You're bored." She thought about all of it for exactly the amount of time it needed to take. Then she moved to the back of the truck. She opened the hidden compartment that she had built into this vehicle herself over 3 nights in the motor pool 14 months ago, telling Reyes she was rewiring the cargo system. She had been rewiring something, just not the cargo system. She looked at what was inside. She began to get ready. The mountains were 3 miles east. 40 men were between her and 6 Americans. She checked her watch. She had approximately 90 minutes before dawn changed everything. 90 minutes. She had worked under tighter margins. She put on what she needed to put on. She checked what she needed to check. She closed the compartment. She faced the darkness. Emily Carter, who was also Shadow, who was also the woman who had sat in a diner and said yes, stepped out of the truck and into the night. And behind her, the maintenance truck with the rattling rear differential and the Forward Redstone registration sat empty and silent in the darkness. Just a mechanic's truck. Nobody would give it a second look. That was exactly the point. She moved toward the mountains. She did not look back. The night received her the way it always had, completely cleanly, without asking who she was. The mountains did not know she was coming. The 40 men inside them did not know she existed. She preferred it that way. She had always preferred it that way. The mechanic was gone. What moved through that darkness had a different name. And 40 men who believed they were untouchable were about to learn what it felt like to be completely wrong about the one thing that mattered most. The darkness was complete. Emily moved through it without a flashlight, without hesitation, without the particular kind of fear that slows the body before the mind gives permission to proceed. She had learned long ago that fear was a signal worth reading, not a feeling worth obeying. It told you where the danger was. It sharpened the edges of your attention. But if you let it make decisions, you were already losing. She moved fast, not recklessly fast, efficiently fast. The kind of fast that came from knowing your body, precisely from understanding the relationship between speed and silence, from years of having to be both at the same time and finding the narrow corridor where those two things coexisted. The terrain was what the satellite imagery had suggested. Rocky, uneven, rising sharply as she climbed away from the road. Her boots found purchase on surfaces that a less experienced person would have slipped on. She did not slip. She did not stumble. She moved the way water moves downhill, finding the path that offered the least resistance while still arriving exactly where it needed to go. 3 miles. In her mind, she was already mapping it. The facility would appear first as a light source. The enemy would not operate in total darkness, because total darkness created accidents, and accidents compromised security. There would be generators. There would be fuel. There would be the particular arrangement of light and shadow that told her where the attention was concentrated, and more importantly, where it was not. She ran the problem as she moved. 40 fighters, 6 hostages, fortified position. The numbers were not encouraging if you looked at them as a combat equation. But Emily had spent years understanding that the combat equation was almost never the right equation. The right equation was the logistics equation, the supply chain equation, the maintenance equation if you wanted to keep the metaphors she lived inside. Everything broke eventually. Everything had a failure point. You just had to find it before it found you. She stopped, crouched, went completely still. 20 yards ahead of her and slightly to her left, she had caught something. Not a sound exactly. More like the absence of the natural sounds that should have been there. The mountains at night made noise when small animals, the settling of rock. When something interrupted that noise pattern, the silence it left behind was louder than any alarm. She waited. 14 seconds later, she saw him. A lone sentry posted at a position not included in the satellite imagery, which meant the enemy had adjusted their patrol pattern in the past 12 hours, which meant someone with tactical intelligence was running this operation. You did not adjust patrol patterns unless you had someone who understood why patrol patterns needed to be adjusted. That was important information. That changed the calculation. She watched him. How was a large man heavily armed, moving with the particular confidence of someone who had done this many times and believed himself to be safe because nothing bad had happened to him yet. He had a rifle slung across his chest and a radio clipped to his shoulder, and he walked with a rhythm that was almost metronome-like, which told her he had been on this post long enough to get comfortable, and comfortable was exactly the condition she was looking for. She gave him 45 seconds to complete his pattern. 45 seconds told her what she needed to know. He checked his left flank twice. He never checked directly behind him. People always forgot behind them. She moved. She was inside his awareness horizon before he understood that anything had changed in the world. What happened next took 11 seconds. At the end of those 11 seconds, the sentry was unconscious against a rock, breathing unharmed in any permanent way, his radio disabled with a precision that would read as technical malfunction rather than interference. Emily took his position for 3 minutes and observed. She counted 2 more sentries visible from that vantage point. She identified the pattern of their movements. She noted the gap in their overlapping fields of awareness. She noted the timing, then she moved again. Captain Delaney was running on her 4th cup of coffee and had stopped pretending that the intelligence picture was anything other than what it was. The situation had not improved. Dawn was coming. The enemy would move the hostages before full light. Everyone in the operations center understood this. Everyone in the operations center was waiting for Briggs to give an order that none of them wanted to give. "Sir," Delaney approached. She kept her voice low. "The rescue planning team needs a decision. If we're going to execute a helicopter assault, we need to be in the air in the next 40 minutes. After that, the window closes." Briggs looked at the satellite feed. The facility was unchanged. I thought about the notification he had received. Protocol Valkyrie. He thought about Carter, who was not just Carter, who had never been just Carter, who he had been briefed on in a single classified memo that he had read once and been instructed to burn and had burned. He thought about what the memo had said about Protocol Valkyrie operators. He thought about the phrase the memo had used. Self-sufficient engagement. No support required. No extraction required. Operator manages complete mission life cycle independently. He thought about a woman in a grease-covered uniform who had fixed every broken vehicle he had ever submitted a work order for. "Sir," Delaney said again, "we need a decision." Briggs looked at her. "How confident are you in the assault timeline?" She did not hesitate. She was good that way. 70% on asset recovery, 30% probability of at least one hostage casualty during breach. The facility configuration doesn't give us a clean entry. And if we wait 30 more minutes, Delaney blinked. That was not a tactical question she had been expecting. "Sir, if we wait 30 minutes without actionable changes on the ground, our window for the helicopter approach closes entirely." After that, our options become significantly more limited and significantly more dangerous to the hostages. Briggs finished. Yes, sir, he nodded slowly. Give me 20 minutes. Delaney stared at him. Sir, the window. 20 minutes, Captain. If the picture changes, we reassess. If it doesn't, we execute the assault plan. He met her eyes. 20 minutes. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. She was trying to read him. She was trying to understand what a 30-year veteran saw in a satellite image that she was not seeing. She did not find it. 20 minutes, she said. She walked back to the planning team. Briggs turned back to the satellite feed. I thought, come on, Carter, whatever you're doing up there. Come on, the compound's communications array was housed in a separate structure from the main building. Emily had identified this from the satellite imagery. A separate structure meant separate power, which meant separate vulnerability. It was a logistics decision someone had made for practical reasons, probably because running communication equipment on dedicated power prevented interference with the main generator load. Practical decisions created practical problems. She studied the array from a position that gave her full observation without exposure. 2 guards, one at the door, one on a patrol circuit that brought him past the array every 4 minutes. The door guard was alert in the way of someone who had been specifically told to be alert, which meant someone had briefed these men that their communication capability was a high-value asset worth protecting, which meant they understood it was also a vulnerability. Smart enemy commanders understood their vulnerabilities. The question was whether understanding a vulnerability was the same as being able to protect it. It was not from her. She checked her watch. She ran the timing. She built the sequence in her head the way she built a repair sequence, first step to last step, every action linked to the next, no gaps, no improvisation after the process began. She gave herself 6 minutes. She did not use all 6 of them. The patrol guard went down first, clean and precise at the 4-minute mark of his cycle. The door guard lasted 3 seconds longer, which was longer than she had planned, and that told her something about him. He was experienced, his reflexes were trained, he processed the situation faster than average, but not fast enough. Inside the communication structure, the array was exactly as she had expected and also different in one critical way. She had anticipated a standard communication setup. What she found was better than standard. The enemy had military-grade encryption equipment, which meant they had either stolen it or purchased it, which meant their supply chain was more sophisticated than the initial intelligence assessment had indicated. And that meant the American intelligence operation that had resulted in this ambush had a leak that went deeper than the tactical level. She filed that information carefully. It was not her problem to solve right now, but it would be someone's problem to solve later, and that someone would need this specific piece of information. She worked on the array. The modifications she made were not simple destruction. Destruction was loud and traceable and created immediate alarm. What she did instead was something more precise. She introduced a failure mode into the system that would present as equipment malfunction. When the enemy tried to communicate, the system would appear to function. Signals would appear to send. Nothing would actually transmit. It would take them between 8 and 14 minutes to diagnose the problem as equipment failure rather than external interference. And by the time they understood, it was neither, something else would have changed. She finished in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. She exited the structure. The mountain was quiet. She moved toward the main building. The main holding structure was the former mining facility's processing building, which meant it had one feature that no purpose-built military installation would have had: multiple internal spaces connected by passages that had been designed for industrial workflow rather than security. Cargo movement. Material processing. The people who built it had been thinking about ore and equipment, not about defending against a single operator who had spent years learning to read structures the way other people read books. She circled the building once from a distance. Full circuit. She noted every entry point. She noted which ones were guarded. She noted which ones were not guarded because the enemy had decided they were not entry points. The enemy was wrong about 3 of them. On her second circuit closer, she identified something she had not been able to confirm from satellite imagery. The structure had been modified, an external addition on the northwest side that had not been present in the original facility plans. A generator housing, additional fuel storage. The power infrastructure for the entire fortified position was housed in that external addition. She stopped. She thought about this. A single power infrastructure point meant a single power failure point. Mechanics understood this intuitively. You never ran critical systems off a single power source without a backup. It was a fundamental principle of systems design. The fact that these men with their military-grade communications equipment and their irregular patrol patterns had centralized all their power through one location said something important about who was making their operational decisions. Someone smart had set up their communications. Someone less smart had set up their power. She filed this information alongside everything else. The picture was building. And pictures, once they were complete enough, showed you exactly where to press. Inside the main structure, SEAL Commander, Lieutenant Daniel Rourke had been counting time the way hostages learned to count time, not with clocks, because there were no clocks, but with the rhythm of guard rotations, with the sound of generators cycling, with the particular quality of darkness and light that the single small window in their holding space produced. I was 41 years old. 17 years in special operations, had been in situations before that qualified as what the military called FUBAR, and this qualified. 6 of them, bound. The room was secured with 2 guards outside and the sound of men on the other side of the wall carrying on conversations in a language he understood well enough to parse the essentials. They were planning to move them before dawn. He knew this. He had been listening for hours. The word for dawn kept appearing in their conversations. The word for truck. The word for before dawn. Moved by truck, he calculated that gave them approximately 90 minutes from the last time he had heard the generator's startup cycle. He looked at his men, 5 face in the darkness. Each of them had been his operator long enough that he could read their condition without asking. Rodriguez was nursing a shoulder injury from the ambush. She was holding herself with the specific careful stillnesses of someone managing pain. Kim was alert, scanning, processing, doing the same calculation he was doing. Okafor had a cut above his eye that had bled enough to concern him before it stopped. Marchetti and Flores were back-to-back in the corner, which was a position they had taken when they first were pushed into this room and had not altered, which told him they had developed a plan they were not ready to execute yet. Graves was the problem. Corpsman Derek Graves had taken a hit during the ambush that was not visible from the outside, but that Rourke had been watching for the past 6 hours. The pallor, the breathing pattern, internal injury possibly, nothing he could assess without equipment he did not have. He needed to get his people out. The problem was the same problem it had been for 6 hours. 40 men stood between them and a mountain that had no guaranteed exit. LT, Kim barely audible. You hear that? Rourke had not heard anything. He listened, and then he heard it, or rather he heard the absence of something. The guards outside the door had been conversational for the past hour. Short exchanges, the low rhythm of 2 men sharing a long shift. He had been tracking it without consciously deciding to track it. The conversation had stopped. Not paused. Stopped. He looked at Kim. Kim looked back. Neither of them moved. Neither of them made a sound. The 2 guards outside the holding room had been Emily's most precise calculation of the night. She needed them removed without any sound that penetrated to the interior of the room. Hostages who heard sounds of struggle might react in ways that created additional variables. She needed clean. She needed quiet. She needed the kind of professional efficiency that left no room for the moment between understanding and response that every conscious human being experienced, no matter how well trained. She gave both of them less of that moment than they were able to use, 14 seconds. Both down, both breathing, both going to have significant headaches when they woke up. She pressed herself against the door. She listened for 10 seconds. Silence from inside. Professionals. They had heard the absence of the guards and they had gone silent themselves, which meant they were trained and they were alert and they were trying to understand what was happening before they did anything that made their situation worse. Good. That was exactly what she wanted from them. She needed them smart. She needed them to move fast when the moment came. She identified the lock, standard mechanism, not military grade, another logistics decision someone had made for convenience. She gave it 12 seconds. The door opened. Inside the room, Rourke saw the door open and every cell in his body went into a state of simultaneous preparation and restraint, which was the specific mode that years of training installed, ready for everything, committed to nothing, waiting for data. The figure in the doorway was not what he expected. Not enemy, he read that in the first fraction of a second. The posture was wrong for enemy. The tactical profile was wrong. The way the figure moved through the door was wrong in a way he could not immediately articulate, but recognized at the level below articulation where real operators process the world. But it was not who he expected either. He had been expecting, if he was honest with himself, a rescue team. 6 to 8 operators in full kit with the specific organized urgency of a sanctioned extraction. Communication devices, backup calling in birds, the infrastructure of a formal rescue. What he got was one person wearing, and he registered this with a confusion he could not fully process in real time, what appeared to be a field-modified version of a maintenance uniform. The figure was a woman. She moved to Graves first. She knelt beside him. She checked him with her hands in the quick, efficient way of someone who knew what she was looking for. She had a blade out before Rourke had completed his first full assessment of the situation, and she was cutting Graves's restraints. "Corpsman is priority," she said without looking up. Her voice was low, absolutely controlled. "He's got internal bruising, possibly a cracked rib left side. He can move. He'll need support." Rourke stared at her. "Who are you?" he asked. She moved to Rodriguez, cut her restraints, checked her shoulder with the same quick efficiency. "Your extraction," she said. "That's not what I asked." She looked at him then, direct. Her eyes were the specific color of someone who had learned to give information without emotion and emotion without information, keeping the two things completely separated. "You have questions," she said. "Good, hold them. Right now I need everyone on their feet, and I need you to tell me which of your people can move fastest and which needs the most support, because we have approximately 30 minutes before the power failure I've scheduled becomes a communication failure they've diagnosed, and after that, the window changes significantly." Kim was already up. He had not waited for permission or instruction. He had heard the operational framework she laid out, and he had processed it, and he had made the same calculations she had made, and he had decided she was right. That was the thing about operators. They recognized each other. Flores, Rourke said, because he was making a decision, and he had decided to make it without the information he still did not have. "Flores and Marchetti are fastest. Rodriguez can move, but she'll need Kim on her left side. Graves moves with me," she said. "I've got him." "You've got 6 of us and 40 of them in a mountain in the dark," Rourke said. "What's your path of exit is northeast. The patrol pattern has a 12-minute gap that opened 8 minutes ago. We have 4 minutes of that gap remaining." She looked at him with those separated eyes. "I need you to decide in the next 30 seconds whether you trust me enough to move or whether you need more information than I have time to give you. Those are the options. What's your answer?" Rourke had been making command decisions for 17 years. He made this one in 4 seconds. "Northeast," he said. "Marchetti on point. Let's go." 6 people moved through a fortified enemy position in the dark behind a woman whose name none of them knew. The experience was, and Rourke would spend months afterward searching for the right language to describe it, almost impossible. Not because it was disorganized, because it was the opposite, because she moved through that compound with a precision that suggested she had rehearsed every meter of it, had already solved every problem before it became a problem, had already placed herself inside the decision loop of every sentry in patrol and guard rotation, and found the gaps in those decision loops, and threaded all of them together into a path that did not exist until she created it by walking through it. She knew where to stop. She knew when to move. She knew, and this was the part that Rourke could not fully explain, she knew when something was about to change before it changed. Twice she held up her fist, and the 6 of them stopped and went still. And 30 seconds later, something happened that would have compromised them if they had not stopped. A guard who had altered his pattern, a door that opened unexpectedly. Both times she had known. Both times they had been still before it mattered. Marchetti, who had 15 years in and had done extractions on 3 continents, leaned close to Flores at one point during a 30-second hold and breathed directly into his ear, Who is this woman?" Flores had no answer. Neither did anyone else. They moved. What Emily had not told them, what she had chosen not to tell them, because it was not information they needed and not information that would have helped anyone move faster, was that the path she was walking had a problem she had not fully solved yet. The northeast exit she had identified required passing within 40 feet of a guard post that she had assessed as potentially vacated based on the patrol timing she had observed during her perimeter circuit. The word potentially was doing significant work in that assessment. If the post was vacant, they passed clean. If it was occupied, she had a 3-second window to address the problem before it became a compound problem. She had run the calculation. She had decided the math was acceptable. Math was not always comfortable, but math was the job. She heard the post before she saw it. Occupied. She processed this in the time it took her to take one step and begin taking the next. She signaled the column behind her. They stopped. She felt the particular quality of tension that 6 trained people produced when they stopped and understood that something had changed and were waiting for direction. She did not look back. She assessed the post. One guard, he was looking northwest, away from their position. His attention was on the outer perimeter, the direction from which a conventional rescue would arrive, because that was what he had been briefed to watch for. He had not been briefed to watch for a woman and 6 compromised operators coming from inside the compound. Nobody watches the inside of the box they're guarding. She gave him 12 seconds to complete the small movement. He was in the middle of shifting his weight, adjusting his grip on his weapon, settling into a new stance. She gave him those 12 seconds because a man in the middle of a movement was harder to address cleanly than a man who had completed it and gone still. She counted. At 11 seconds, she moved. At 3 seconds past that, the post was clear. She signaled the column. They moved. At Forward Redstone, Delaney's voice cut across the operations center with the specific quality of someone who has just seen something on a screen that they cannot immediately explain. Sir? She was staring at the satellite feed. Something's happening at the facility. Briggs was beside her in 4 steps. The feed showed the compound. It was mostly unchanged, but there was movement near the northeast perimeter. Small, fast, multiple figures, moving away from the compound. Delaney counted. She counted again. Her face did the thing that faces do when they are trying to reconcile what they are seeing with what they thought they were going to see. She stopped. 7, Briggs said. She looked at him. That's 7 people, he said. 6 were captured. 1 went in. The silence in the operations center had a texture to it. Sir, Delaney said carefully, what are you telling me? Briggs watched the feed. The 7 figures were moving fast, coordinated, already past the outer perimeter wire. I'm telling you to get a medical team to grid reference Alpha 7. He pointed to a point on the map. Have them there in 20 minutes and scramble a transport. No weapons hot. This is a pickup, not an assault. Sir, our extraction protocol requires... Captain, he said it quietly, the way you said something when you only needed to say it once. Grid Alpha 7, 20 minutes, medical team transport. She held his gaze for 2 seconds. Yes, sir, she said. She started moving. Briggs looked back at the satellite feed. The 7 figures were gone from the frame. Into the mountain dark. He exhaled slowly. I thought about a diner outside Fort Benning, a conversation he had never been part of, a decision made 11 years ago that had resulted in a woman with grease on her uniform and the specific patience of someone who was exactly where they had chosen to be. He thought about the wrench she had set down. He said nothing to the room. The operations center moved around him, everyone executing the orders he had given, everyone focused on the next 30 minutes. Only Briggs stood still, standing still and thinking about what kind of person spent 3 years pretending to be ordinary, so that when the moment came, nobody saw it coming. 2 miles from the compound, Emily stopped. She turned and looked at Graves, who was moving under his own power, but had been breathing with the careful deliberateness of someone managing pain, with the only tool available to them, which was their own decision to keep moving. Stop, she told him, not harshly, the way you told a machine to stop cycling when you needed to assess it. I'm fine, he said. I know you are, she said. Breathe normally for 30 seconds. You've been guarding your left side and it's slowing your gait, and I need your gait to be uncompromised in the next mile. He looked at her. He breathed normally for 30 seconds. She watched his color, watched his breathing, made her assessment. Okay, she said. 1 more mile, then we have transport. Rodriguez spoke for the first time. She had been focused and silent during the entire extraction, the specific silence of someone conserving everything for the work. Transport from where? There's no L's inside 10 miles. There's a road, Emily said. Grid Alpha 7, a vehicle will be there. Kim looked at her with something in his face that was not exactly skepticism and not exactly wonder, but lived somewhere between the two. How do you know that? He asked. Because I arranged it, she said, from inside an enemy compound. Before. You arranged transport before you went in. Good logistics means working the problem from both ends, she said. You identify your extraction point before you identify your entry point. Entry is meaningless without exit. The six of them were staring at her. She looked back at them with the particular patience of someone who had all the time in the world and also needed to keep moving. 1 mile, she said. Questions after. Rourke found himself almost smiling. 17 years in special operations. He had worked with the best operators the military had produced. He had operated with DevGru. He had done joint missions with Delta. He had been on teams that had completed things that could not be discussed in any room that was not explicitly cleared for the information. He had never met anyone quite like this. Move out, he said. They moved. The compound behind them was beginning to understand that something had happened. Emily heard it before she saw any evidence of it, a change in the pattern of radio communications that reached her even at 2 miles through the mountain air, the specific quality of human voice on radio that occurred when understanding arrived and the understanding was bad. Not alarm exactly, not yet. The moment before alarm, the moment when the pieces were being assembled. She pushed the pace. Nobody complained. These were SEAL operators. They did not complain about pace. She suspected they could have moved faster and had been matching her speed as a courtesy, which she would have found amusing under different circumstances. Faster, she said. They went faster. She went with them. 1 mile became half a mile, became a quarter mile, became the sound of a vehicle engine running quiet in the dark, exactly where she had calculated it would be, and the shapes of people beside it who were not enemy, whose posture and arrangement told her immediately what they were. And she called a halt and used a signal that nobody outside of a specific cleared community would have recognized, and the shapes beside the vehicle returned the signal, and that was that. The 7 of them walked out of the mountain dark into the reach of headlights. Rourke at the military medical team that materialized around them. He looked at the transport vehicle. He looked at the uniformed personnel who were already moving with the organized efficiency of people executing a pre-planned protocol. He looked at the woman beside him. She had not stopped or slowed or changed her expression in any way that indicated the past 2 hours had cost her anything, which he knew was not true. It had cost her something. Everything cost something, but she had placed the cost in a location he could not see, and he understood somehow that he was not supposed to see it. You planned the transport before you went in, he said again. Not a question this time. He was assembling the picture. Yes. You circuited the compound. You identified the patrol patterns. You took down the communications array. You extracted 6 people through a gap in a 40-man defensive position. He paused. Alone? Yes. Who sent you? She looked at him with those even eyes. No one sent me, she said. He studied her. Protocol Valkyrie, he said quietly. He said it the way you said a phrase you had heard once in a briefing that was classified so high you had been instructed to forget you had heard it. She did not confirm or deny. She did not need to. The confirmation was the fact that 6 of his people were standing around him breathing mountain air instead of the inside of a holding room. Your name, he said. What's your actual name? She was already stepping back, already separating herself from the group in the way of someone who understood that the next phase of this belonged to other people, and her role in it was complete. Carter, she said. Carter. He held the word like he was checking whether it was the full weight of the thing. Just Carter. Just Carter, she said. Graves was being helped into the transport. Rodriguez was being assessed. The medical team was doing what medical teams did, which was take the broken pieces of people and begin the work of making them whole. She watched this. She allowed herself 15 seconds of watching it, which was longer than she usually allowed herself, and she paid the cost of those 15 seconds without flinching. Then she turned. Ma'am. It was Kim. He had followed her. Of course, it was Kim. Kim had processed everything. The fastest had been reading her the most accurately during the entire extraction. He was standing 3 feet away with an expression that contained something she recognized. Gratitude, but not the comfortable kind. The kind that understood something significant had been given and could not be adequately returned. Don't, she said. He almost smiled. I was just going to say we owe you. You don't, she said. This is what it's supposed to be. Nobody gets left. That's the whole thing. He nodded. Carter, he said. Kim, she said back. She walked to the maintenance truck, the one with the rattling rear differential, the one that had been sitting at grid Alpha 7 since she had parked it on her way in, the one that Specialist Kowalski had logged out of FOB Redstone as a routine parts run. She got in. She sat for a moment. The mountain was behind her. The compound, which would, in the next 30 minutes, realize that 6 American prisoners had simply ceased to exist inside its walls, was behind her. The 40 men who had believed themselves untouchable were behind her. She started the engine. The rear differential made its familiar sound. She had been meaning to fix that. She drove back toward the road, back toward the route she knew, back toward Phoebe Redstone and the motor pool and the coffee maker that she kept intentionally broken, and the radio that played country music during the day. In the transport behind her, 6 people were being kept alive by medical professionals executing a protocol that someone had arranged before the rescue operation began. Ahead of her, dawn was developing at the edge of the sky in the way it always did, not all at once, but gradually, light building on light, the world revealing itself one layer at a time. She drove into it, the mechanic going home, the operator going quiet, the woman who had done what needed to be done, returning to the life that nobody suspected was covering for anything at all. Behind her, the mountains held their silence. They did not volunteer what they knew. Mountains never did. 0541 hours. The maintenance truck rolled back through the Phoebe Redstone gate at the speed of something that had nothing to hide. Specialist Kowalski was still at the gate. Same post, different coffee, same exhaustion, same 6 hours remaining on a shift that felt like it had been designed by someone who genuinely disliked him. He logged the vehicle in without looking up from his clipboard. Parts run completed, return time noted, driver verified. He waved her through. Emily drove to the motor pool and parked the truck in its assigned space. She sat in the cab for 45 seconds. Not because she needed to collect herself, not because she was processing what had happened. She sat there because 45 seconds of stillness was her standard practice before transitioning between operational mode and cover mode. And she had learned in 11 years that shortcuts in transition were where mistakes lived. 45 seconds. Then she got out. She walked to the maintenance room. She changed back into her standard uniform. She washed her hands at the utility sink the way she washed them every morning, with the industrial soap working between the fingers, getting the grease from under the nails. The routine of it was not accidental. Routine was the anchor. Routine was what kept the line between one life and another from fraying. She started the coffee maker. It did not work properly. She was fine with that. Morning, Sergeant Carter, he said. Morning, Reyes, she said from under the truck. There's coffee. It's bad. He poured himself a cup. He stood there for a moment. Did you, he stopped. Did I, what, nothing, he said. Never mind. She did not respond. He drank his bad coffee. The motor pool moved into its morning rhythm. And for approximately 2 hours, it seemed like nothing had changed at all. The first indication that something had changed arrived in the form of Colonel Marcus Briggs walking into the motor pool. Briggs did not come to the motor pool. In 3 years and 4 months of Emily's assignment to FOB Redstone, Briggs had submitted work orders through his aide, had communicated through the chain of logistics, had never once personally appeared in the space where vehicles were repaired. Colonels did not come to the motor pool. The motor pool came to colonels through paperwork and schedules and the invisible infrastructure of maintenance that kept the base functional and unnoticed. Reyes saw him first. He straightened so fast he spilled coffee on his sleeve. Colonel on deck, he started. At ease, Briggs said without breaking stride. He was looking past Reyes. He was looking at the utility truck. Emily rolled out from underneath it. She looked up at Briggs from the floor wrench in hand, and the expression on her face was exactly the expression of a mechanic who has just been interrupted during a brake line repair. Focused, slightly inconvenienced, professionally attentive. Sir, she said. Briggs looked at her for a long moment. I need a word, Sergeant Carter, he said. Of course, sir. She stood. She set the wrench on the workbench. Reyes, give us the room. Reyes left with the speed of someone who had decided that whatever was happening was above his clearance level, and he was grateful to be excused from proximity to it. The motor pool door swung shut behind him. Briggs waited until the sound of Reyes's footsteps had moved far enough away. Then he said, 7 people came off that mountain this morning. Emily picked up a rag and began cleaning her hands. I heard there was an operation. 6 of them were SEAL operators who went missing 17 hours ago. He paused. The 7th one drove a maintenance truck back to base and was under a vehicle by the time most of the base had finished breakfast. She looked at him. I don't know what you want me to say, sir. I don't want you to say anything. He moved closer, lowered his voice through they were alone. What I want, Carter, is to understand what I'm sitting on. Because right now I have a classified incident report that describes a successful hostage recovery with 0 friendly casualties, and I have a satellite record that shows 1 person entering that compound and 7 people leaving it. And I have Protocol Valkyrie on my notification log. And I have a maintenance sergeant who came back from a parts run and went directly to work on a brake line. She folded the rag, set it down. The brake line was leaking before I left, she said. It needed to be addressed. Briggs stared at her. Then something happened that surprised her, which was not an easy thing to do. He exhaled, not in frustration, in something that was closer to relief. The SEAL commander, he said. Rourke, he's already filed a request for your classification level. She went still. I wants to know who you are, Briggs said. So does the rest of his team. So does Captain Delaney, who is currently trying to reconcile the satellite imagery with the absence of any rescue operation deployment from this base. He looked at her steadily. She's good, Carter. She's going to get there. Emily was quiet for 3 seconds. How long do I have? Before Delaney figures it out. Maybe 6 hours. She's already pulled the gate log. She's going to find Kowalski's entry. She'll pull the satellite imagery of the truck leaving and returning. He paused. She's going to find you. And when she does, Briggs met her eyes. That's what I'm here to discuss, he said. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. Emily had not had a conversation like this in 3 years and 4 months. The kind of conversation where both participants understood that what they were talking about was not what they appeared to be talking about, where the words on the surface were logistics and protocol and chain of command, and the words underneath were about trust and exposure and the specific vulnerability of a cover identity that had just been used in a way that left marks. Briggs was good at these conversations. He was not supposed to know about Protocol Valkyrie in any operational detail, but he was smart enough that knowing it existed and observing what it had produced was sufficient for him to draw conclusions that were functionally equivalent to the classified briefing he had never received. You need to disappear from here, he said. Not unkindly, the way you told someone a hard logistical truth. I know that, she said. Delaney's investigation can be redirected. There are classification levels that will stop it, but the redirect will itself draw attention if it's too heavy-handed, and attention is the thing I can't have, she said. I know. He studied her. Do you want to leave? The question surprised her by being harder than she expected. She looked at the motor pool, at the trucks and the hydraulic lifts and the shelving units and the bag coffee maker and the radio in the corner that played country music. She looked at all of it with the particular quality of attention of someone who is looking at something for possibly the last time and trying to decide how much that matters. It mattered more than she wanted it to. That was the honest answer. The 6 people who came off that mountain this morning, she said, they're okay. All 6 will recover fully, Briggs said. Graves has a cracked rib and soft tissue damage. He'll be back on full duty in 8 weeks. Rodriguez needs surgery on the shoulder. Successful outcome projected. He paused. All 6 are alive. All 6 came home. She nodded once. Then what I want isn't the relevant variable, she said. Briggs was quiet. I was the kind of man who recognized when he was in the presence of something he did not fully have language for and responded to it by being quiet. Emily respected that about him. A lot of people tried to fill the space. Briggs let it exist. There's a new assignment, he said finally. She looked at him. It came through the same channel as the activation notification, he said. Not a deployment, not an operation, something more like what you've been doing here, a different location, a different cover, same architecture. He paused. Similar work when the work is needed. More broken engines, she said. More broken engines, he said. She thought about Reyes, about his Sunday phone calls to his mother, about the particular way he asked questions he had already half answered. She thought about Kowalski at the gate with his bad coffee and his honest face. She thought about Captain Delaney, who was good and was going to find the thread and follow it. She thought about 6 people on a mountain. She thought about 3 words on a screen. When she said, 48 hours. She nodded. Briggs moved towards the door. He stopped. Carter, he said. She looked at him. For what it's worth, he said, from a 30-year man. What you did last night, he stopped. Started again. I've seen a lot of operations. I've seen the best people this country has to offer do things under pressure that I could not have predicted or asked for. And what you did last night, he shook his head slowly. Nobody gets left. You understand that better than most. She was quiet. Thank you, sir, she said. It was the most she had in the moment, and she meant it fully. He left. The motor pool went back to its silence. She stood in the middle of it for a long moment. Then she picked up the wrench. She went back under the truck. The brake line needed to be finished. She had been pulling on it since 0630, which meant it had taken her 4 hours and 54 minutes to move from observing the satellite anomaly to sitting across from Specialist Kowalski in a room that was not technically an interrogation room, but had the architecture and atmosphere of one. Kowalski was 23 years old and had the specific kind of honest face that made lying difficult even when lying would have been the easier option. Did she say anything unusual? Delaney asked. No, ma'am. Did she seem different? Agitated, hurried. Kowalski thought about this with the genuine effort of someone trying to be accurate rather than helpful. She seemed like Carter, he said. Delaney looked at him. What does that mean? It means she seemed exactly like she always does, Kowalski said. Quiet, calm, like she had somewhere to be and she was going there and it wasn't a big deal. Delaney sat back. She thought about this. She had pulled Carter's service record 2 hours ago. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter, 8 years of service, maintained an exemplary performance record in maintenance operations. Prior to Forward Redstone, a deployment record that was she had noticed this and not yet fully processed what to do with it, unusually sparse for someone with 8 years in. The kind of record that had the shape of a record but not the substance of one. The kind of record that someone had put thought into constructing. She had flagged it. She had submitted an inquiry to the personnel record system. The inquiry had been processed in 47 seconds, which was much faster than personnel inquiries were normally processed, and the response had been a classification level notification that was 3 levels above Delaney's current clearance. 3 levels. Delaney had a top secret clearance with SCI access. The notification that came back was above that. She had been in the intelligence community long enough to know what that meant. It meant stop. It meant you have reached the edge of what you are permitted to know. It meant that the thing you are looking at is larger than the frame you are looking through. She sat with Kowalski for another 10 minutes, thanked him, and let him go. Then she sat alone in the room. She thought about the satellite feed. 7 people coming off a mountain. 6 hostages, recovered 0 friendly casualties, enemy position effectively neutralized by an unknown actor. She thought about the gap in the satellite imagery where the 7th person had separated from the group and walked off frame. She thought about Kowalski's face and his words. She seemed like Carter. She seemed exactly like she always does. She thought about the classification wall she had hit. She thought about all of it for a long time. Then she made a decision that her career training said was correct, and that something else in her, something trained by instinct rather than procedure, told her was important beyond its technical correctness. She closed the inquiry. She filed a report that described the satellite anomaly as inconclusive due to low-resolution imagery and logged the hostage recovery under the sanctioned rescue operation that had been activated from official channels, with a notation that independent assets may have contributed to the outcome. Independent assets, that was the language. Vague enough to be technically accurate, complete enough to be professionally responsible, small enough to bury in a file that very few people would read closely. She submitted the report. She got up and got coffee. She thought about the maintenance sergeant she had seen twice from a distance, never spoken to, who kept the base's vehicles running and drank bad coffee and was apparently 3 classification levels above anything Delaney was cleared to access. She thought some things you trust without knowing why. She drank her coffee. She did not pull the thread again. Rourke was in the base medical facility sitting in a chair beside Graves's bed when Kim came to find him. Graves was sleeping. The medical team had him on a pain management protocol and had taped his rib and told him 8 weeks, and he had said 6. And they had said 8, and he had said 7. And they had settled on 7.5 in the way of people who understood that the negotiation was less about the rib and more about what it cost a person like Graves to be told how long he was going to be sitting still. Rourke had been sitting with him for an hour, not because Graves needed company, but because Rourke needed to sit somewhere quiet and process the past 18 hours. And Graves' room was the quietest place he could find. Kim came in and stood near the door. "You find anything?" Rourke asked. "Hit a classification wall," Kim said. "3 levels above my clearance." Rourke nodded. He had expected this. Marchetti. Same. Floors tried a different route, went through the personnel system with the physical description and the operational profile. Got the same wall. Rourke was quiet. Kim moved closer, sat in the chair on the other side of Graves's bed. "LT," he said quietly enough that it would not wake Graves. "I've been thinking about it since we came off the mountain." "I know," Rourke said. "The way she moved, the way she ran the whole thing, entry, extraction, transport, medical team, pre-positioned. That's not one person's operation. That's not improvised." Kim paused. "That was rehearsed. Not this specific mission, but she's done this. She's done versions of this many times." "Yes," Rourke said. "And she's been on this base," Kim said, "fixing trucks. For how long?" 3 years, according to what I could get before the wall." Kim sat back. He looked at the ceiling. He processed. 3 years, he said. "Yes." 3 years of being the mechanic. "Yes." While being, Kim stopped. He did not complete the sentence because completing it meant saying something out loud that felt like it deserved more than a hospital room and a sleeping corpsman. "While being exactly what she needed to be," Rourke said, "until she didn't need to be that anymore." They were quiet together for a moment. Graves shifted in his sleep. His breathing remained even and deep, the sound of a man who was healing. "Rodriguez wants to find her," Kim said. "She asked me to check. Rodriguez should focus on her shoulder." "That's not how Rodriguez operates, and you know it." Rourke almost smiled. Rodriguez had been Rodriguez since the day she joined the team 4 years ago, and Rodriguez operated on the principle that gratitude was a verb, not a feeling, which meant she looked for the action that corresponded to it. "Tell Rodriguez," Rourke said carefully, "that some people choose not to be found, and that choosing not to be found is itself a kind of answer to the question of what we owe them." Kim looked at him. "You're saying let it go." "I'm saying respect it," Rourke said. "What she did on that mountain, she did it because that's what it is. That's the whole thing. Nobody gets left. She understood that in both directions. She came for us. We respect how she came and what she chose to be afterward." Kim thought about this. He thought about it the way he thought about most things, which was thoroughly and without rushing to a conclusion before the conclusion was ready. "Okay," he said. "Okay," Rourke said. Graves breathed. The medical facility was quiet. Reyes found Sergeant Carter in the back of the motor pool at 16:17 hours, sitting on the same crate she sometimes sat on when she took her afternoon break, drinking coffee that everyone knew was bad, and nobody seemed to be able to improve. He had been working himself up to this conversation since morning. "I was 22 years old from Corpus Christi, called his mother every Sunday, and was generally not in the habit of approaching his supervisor with observations that were technically outside his clearance level to have made. But he had been sitting with this specific thing since our 140 hours when he had heard the maintenance truck leave, and it had been getting heavier as the day went on. And he had decided that the choice between carrying it and setting it down was less about clearance and more about what kind of person he was. "Sergeant Carter," he said. She looked at him. "I heard the truck leave last night," he said, "at 0140. She held her coffee cup, did not look away. And she said, "And I didn't do anything about it." He paused. "I should have logged it or checked, or I don't know, but I didn't. I went back to sleep." He met her eyes. "And then I came in this morning, and you were under the truck, and 6 people who were missing came back alive." The motor pool was quiet. A bird somewhere outside made a sound and then went quiet. Emily set down her coffee cup. "Reyes," she said. "Yes, Sergeant Carter. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." He blinked. "Ma'am, you trusted your supervisor's judgment. You did not interfere with an operation you did not have full visibility on. You showed up this morning on time and did your job." She looked at him steadily. That is exactly what you were supposed to do. He was quiet for a moment. Those 6 people, he said, the ones who came back. What about them? He stopped, restarted. Is that something he stopped again. She picked up her coffee. Reyes, she said. Yes, Sergeant Carter. Do you know why I keep the coffee maker broken? The question surprised him enough that he answered it honestly, instead of asking why she was answering his question with a completely different question. No, ma'am. Because if I fix it, people will expect it to work, she said. And when things that are expected to work stop working, it creates a crisis. But when a broken coffee maker produces bad coffee, nobody is surprised. Nobody panics. Nobody has to reassess their understanding of how the world operates. She set the cup down again. Some things are more valuable broken than fixed, because the broken version doesn't create expectations that have to be managed. He stared at her. I was 22, but he was not slow. He turned the metaphor over in his mind and looked at all the sides of it. I think I understand, he said. Good, she said. Does that mean he stopped? It means you're going to finish the brake line on the utility truck before end of shift, she said. Because it actually needs to be done, and I started it this morning and ran out of time. Yes, Sergeant Carter, he said. He went to the utility truck. He finished the brake line. He did not ask the other questions. Emily watched him work and thought about 48 hours and the assignment that was coming, and the different location and the different cover in the same architecture. And she thought about what Briggs had said, nobody gets left, and she thought about what she had said back. Thank you, sir. And she thought about how those two things together felt like the closest thing to the full truth of what she was that anyone had managed to say out loud in 3 years and 4 months. The base had gone into its evening rhythm when Rodriguez found her. This surprised Emily because Rodriguez was not supposed to be mobile. The shoulder had required a sling, and the medical team had given her explicit instructions about mobility restrictions. Instructions that Rodriguez had apparently assessed and found to be recommendations rather than requirements. She came into the motor pool with her right arm in a sling and her left hand loose at her side in the specific energy of someone who has made a decision that she is going to be comfortable with regardless of how it lands. Emily was at the workbench. She heard the footsteps. She registered the weight pattern and the pace and the slight asymmetry of someone managing a sling, and she knew before Rodriguez appeared who it was. You should be in medical, Emily said without turning around. Probably, Rodriguez said. She came and stood beside the workbench. She was 34 years old, Puerto Rican, had been in special operations for 10 years, and had a face that defaulted to a kind of direct assessment that made some people uncomfortable and made other people feel deeply seen. She looked at Emily for a long moment. Emily looked back. I need to ask you something, Rodriguez said. Ask. When you came through that door, Rodriguez said, the holding room, you moved to Graves first. Graves was the highest medical priority. You assessed that from outside a locked door in the dark. I assessed it from the way you were all positioned in the room and the way his breathing sounded through the wall. Emily paused. And from the way you were all positioned around him. You were protecting him. That told me he was the most vulnerable. Rodriguez was quiet. You saw all of that, she said, in the dark. I pay attention, Emily said. Rodriguez nodded. She was processing this. She was not a woman who processed things without going all the way through them. The shoulder is going to take 6 weeks minimum, Rodriguez said, realistically closer to 8. She said this not as a complaint, but as a fact being assessed. Rourke says I'll be cleared for full duty by Q1. That sounds right, Emily said. I hate sitting still. I know the feeling. Rodriguez looked at her with those direct eyes. How long did it take you, she asked. Emily looked up from the workbench. How long did what take me getting used to it? Rodriguez said. The sitting still, the being ordinary. She made a gesture with her good hand that encompassed the motor pool, the base, the 3 years, all of it. The pretending. The word hung in the air between them. Emily held it there. She did not correct it. She did not deflect it. She looked at it the way you looked at something true that was also complicated. It took about 8 months, she said, before it stopped feeling like a performance and started feeling like a practice, Rodriguez nodded. And then it stopped feeling like either one, Emily said. It started feeling like a choice I made every day. Some days the choice was easy. Some days it cost something. She paused. But the choice was mine. That's the part that made it bearable. Rodriguez held this answer like she was checking its weight. I'm not going anywhere, Rodriguez said finally. I needed to ask someone who had done it. Emily looked at her. Done what? Kept going, Rodriguez said simply. After the part that was hard. Kept going and kept choosing and kept showing up. The motor pool was very quiet. Emily thought about Graves breathing in his hospital bed, about Kim in the chair beside him, about Rourke who had said, trust me in 4 seconds, after 6 hours of captivity, and had meant it completely. She thought about the 6 of them on that mountain moving through darkness behind her. She thought about how trust was the most available and the most expensive thing in the world. You kept going last night, Emily said, on that mountain with that shoulder. You didn't say a word. You kept the pace and you moved and you did the job. Rodriguez almost smiled. That was different. No, Emily said. It was exactly the same. They looked at each other. 2 women who had been trained to give everything and ask very little, and who understood at a cellular level the precise cost of choosing that. Thank you, Rodriguez said. She said it the way Rourke had told Kim to respect it, not as a transaction, but as an acknowledgement. Full and simple, and without expectation of response. Emily nodded. Rodriguez left. The motor pool door closed behind her. Emily was alone. She had been alone in the motor pool many times in 3 years, and it had always had the same quality, the satisfied silence of a space where things worked that had once been broken. The trucks lined up in their positions, engines, functional fluids, topped systems checked. She had put all of this in order, one vehicle at a time over 3 years, and there was a specific feeling she could not fully name that came from that. Not pride exactly. Satisfaction, maybe. The satisfaction of a job that was real, that had genuine consequence, that mattered to the people whose lives depended on working vehicles. Even if those people never thought about it, even if the vehicles working seemed to them as natural as gravity. She walked through the motor pool slowly. She ran her hand along the side of the utility truck. The one with the rattling rear differential. The one that had driven through a gate at 0148 and come back at 0541 with 6 more alive people in the world. She thought about fixing the differential. She thought about 48 hours. She thought about leaving it for whoever came next, that the next maintenance sergeant would find a truck with a rattle that needed addressing and would address it without knowing what the truck had done the last time it went out on a parts run, without knowing what it had carried toward those mountains, without knowing what kind of person had sat in its cab in the darkness and worked a problem from both ends. That was fine. That was how it was supposed to work. She went to the storage room. She unlocked it. She opened the hidden compartment. She looked at what was inside. Then she began methodically and without hurry to prepare the compartment for closure. Not permanent closure, she would leave the architecture intact for the protocol to reactivate if it ever needed to. But the specific items that belonged to her, to Shadow, to the woman whose name had disappeared from official records, those she packed with the same careful precision. She packed everything. The encrypted device, the communication equipment, the mission files that belonged to no archive that anyone would ever catalog. She packed them. She closed the case. She stood in the storage room for a moment and let herself feel exactly what she felt, which was a specific mixture of things that did not have a single name in any language. She spoke grief was part of it, and gratitude was part of it, and something that was very close to peace was part of it too. 3 years and 4 months. Reyes calling his mother on Sundays. Kowalski at the gate with his bad coffee. Briggs saying nobody gets left. Rodriguez coming through the motor pool door with her arm in a sling because she needed to ask someone who had done it. The brake line on the utility truck. The broken coffee maker. The radio that played country music during the day. All of it real, all of it chosen, all of it hers for this specific time in this specific way. She closed the storage room. She locked it. She walked back through the motor pool one more time. At the workbench, she stopped. She picked up the wrench. She set it down. She picked it up again. She held it for a moment with both hands, the weight of it familiar, the feel of it, something she had stopped noticing years ago and was now noticing again the way you notice things when you understood you were about to stop having them. Then she set it down. For good. She turned off the lights. She walked out. The motor pool door closed behind her. In the dark, the trucks sat in their positions. Engines functional, systems checked, everything in order, everything that had been broken fixed. 48 hours. She walked toward the barracks under a sky that was full of stars, and the base moved around her with its nighttime sounds, and nobody who saw her saw anything other than a maintenance sergeant walking through an ordinary night. The way it was supposed to be. The way she had learned to make it. Not the end of something, the next version of the same choice. Tomorrow she would wake up and drink bad coffee and begin the particular work of handing off 32 vehicles in the institutional memory of their individual problems and personalities to whoever came next. Tomorrow she would start writing the notes that a good maintenance sergeant leaves behind. The ones that said, the utility truck has a differential rattle that needs addressing. The coffee maker on the south wall needs a new heating element. Reyes prefers to be given a problem and left to solve it, check his work at the end, not during. She would write all of it. She would leave it neat, because that was what professionals did. They left things better than they found them, even when leaving was the hardest part. She walked through the base. The stars above her were the same stars that had been above the mountains 10 hours ago, when she had moved through the dark toward 40 men who did not know she was coming, towards 6 people who did not know anyone was coming. The same stars, a different version of the night. Shah kept walking. Emily had not slept more than 90 minutes. Not because she could not sleep. Sleep was a discipline like everything else, and she had mastered it in environments considerably more hostile than a base bunk. She had chosen not to sleep because there were exactly 47 hours remaining before her reassignment activated, and she had decided to use those hours the way she used everything, completely without waste, without the luxury of pretending time was something other than what it was. She was sitting at the workbench in the motor pool at Bo 614 when her secure device vibrated for the first time since she had sent the confirmation message 2 nights ago. She picked it up. The message was not from the channel she expected. It was from a channel she had not seen active in over 2 years. A designation she recognized because she had been briefed on it once, in a different room in a different life, by the same woman who had sat across from her in a diner outside Fort Benning and said, "You are bored." The message read, "Request for direct contact, your discretion, M." She stared at it. M was Colonel Margaret Voss, retired now, at least officially. The woman who had recruited her. The woman who had overseen the classified unit during Emily's operational years. The woman who had sat in a room during a 9-day debrief and said very little and listened to everything, and at the end had offered Emily the 2 options, with the same steady voice she would have used to describe the weather. M had not contacted her directly in 3 years. M contacting her directly meant something had happened that was larger than the information Emily already had. She checked the timestamp on the message. It had been sent 11 minutes ago. She responded, "Secure line, 30 minutes." The call came through on equipment she had to retrieve from the now packed case in the storage compartment. She unpacked it, set it up, sat on the oil filter crate, and answered on the first vibration. The voice on the other end was exactly as she remembered. 63 years old, a voice that had spent decades giving orders in rooms where the stakes were high enough that tone mattered as much as content. Emily, the Voss said, not Carter, not Shadow, Emily. That told her the conversation was going to be about something personal, or something that had the shape of the personal on the outside and the shape of something much larger underneath. "Colonel," Emily said. Retired Voss said, the same way she always corrected it, a ritual that meant nothing strategically, but that both of them maintained because ritual was part of how you marked time when time needed marking. "What happened?" Emily said. A pause, brief, the kind that Voss used when she was choosing between versions of the truth, not between truth and lie, because Voss did not operate in the territory of lies, but between the version of the truth that was administratively accurate and the version that was operationally complete. "The compound," Voss said, "the one you cleared 2 nights ago." Emily waited. "Intelligence went back through it this morning. 12 hours after you came off the mountain, a joint team conducted an official sweep." Another pause. "They found the communications array. Specifically, they found what you did to it." Emily was very still. "The modification you made," Voss said, "the failure mode you introduced, the technical signature of it." She paused. "Emily, there are 12 people in the world who know that specific methodology. It was developed in a classified program in 2016. It is not published anywhere. It exists in 3 documents, all of which are above the classification level of anyone currently serving in a conventional capacity. I understand, Emily said. The joint team has a signals intelligence officer attached. Former NSA, she identified the signature within 2 hours of the sweep. Voss's voice was steady. She filed a report. That report has now been seen by 4 people. One of those 4 people has access to the program files. Emily closed her eyes for 3 seconds. They'll trace it to the unit, she said. They'll trace it to a former unit member, Voss said, which narrows the field to 12 people. 2 of those 12 are deceased. 3 are currently deployed in positions that would have made physical presence at that compound impossible. That leaves 7. 7 including me, Emily said. 7 including you, Voss said. The motor pool was completely quiet. Emily opened her eyes. The 48-hour reassignment window, she said, has been moved up, Voss said. You need to be gone in 12. 12 hours. She had written half of the handoff notes. She had not said anything to Reyes. She had not finished the last 2 vehicles on her service queue. The utility truck's differential still rattled. Okay, she said. I'm sorry, Emily, Voss said. It surprised her. Not the content she understood, why Voss was sorry she could enumerate the reasons with precision. What surprised her was the directness of it. Voss was not a woman who apologized as protocol. When she said sorry, it meant something specific had happened that she felt responsible for, and she was acknowledging that responsibility out loud. You didn't know the signals officer would identify it, Emily said. No, Voss said, but I knew when I sent the activation that using Protocol Valkyrie created exposure risk. I assessed the risk as acceptable given the alternative. A pause. 6 people alive. I assessed that as worth the risk. It was, Emily said. I assessed the same thing. I know you did, Voss said. That's why I sent it to you. They were quiet together for a moment. 2 women on a secure line separated by distance and years and a shared language that no one outside a very small room would ever be able to translate. The new assignment, Emily said. Same architecture, Voss said. Different operational environment. You'll be briefed fully on arrival. She paused. It's not a motor pool. Emily almost laughed. What is it? A hospital, Voss said. Civilian, large regional facility. You'll be in facilities management, maintenance, and systems operations. Emily thought about this. Broken things, she said. Broken things, Voss said. Okay, Emily said. Emily. Voss's voice carried something that was not quite worry and not quite pride, but lived in the neighborhood of both. What you did on that mountain. I saw the satellite imagery. I read the signals report. I talked to 3 people who talked to the SEAL team. A pause. You went in alone. It was cleaner alone, Emily said. I know why you went alone, Voss said. I'm not questioning the decision. I'm saying, another pause, longer this time. I'm saying I'm glad you came back. The simplicity of it landed differently than Emily had expected. She had been told many things in her career. She had been told she was effective. She had been told she was an asset. She had been told her operational profile was exceptional, and her performance record was remarkable, and her risk assessment was consistently accurate. She had been told all of the things that the military found language for. Nobody had told her they were glad she came back. Not like that. Thank you, she said, and meant it the way she had meant, thank you, Sir, to Briggs, completely without performance. 12 hours, Voss said. 12 hours, Emily confirmed. The line went silent. Reyes arrived for his shift at 0712 and found Sergeant Carter at the workbench writing on a yellow legal pad in the particular dense handwriting of someone putting a lot of information into a small space. He had learned in 8 months of working with her that certain versions of her quiet meant something specific. The quiet she kept while working on an engine was one kind. The quiet she kept when she was thinking through a problem was another. The quiet she had right now was a kind he had not seen before. He stood in the doorway. Sergeant Carter, he said. She looked up, assessed him, made a decision. Come here, Reyes, she said. He came to the workbench. She turned the legal pad toward him. It was dense with information, vehicle by vehicle notes, service histories, known quirks, timing patterns for systems that behave differently in heat versus cold, notes on which suppliers were reliable and which required a follow-up call, notes on base personnel and their vehicles, who was rough on brakes, who needed reminding about oil changes, who would bring a vehicle in at the last minute with a problem that had been developing for 6 weeks. At the top of the page it said, "For the next maintenance sergeant." Reyes stared at it. His face did the thing that young faces do when they receive information. They have not prepared themselves to receive it, went very still, then slightly open, then very still again. "You're leaving," he said. "A reassignment," she said, when she held his gaze. "Today," she said. He looked at the legal pad. He looked at the motor pool. He looked at the coffee maker. "Today," he said. "I need you to listen carefully," she said, "because I'm going to tell you some things, and I have limited time to tell them, and I need you to retain them." He straightened. Not military sharp, just the straightness of someone who has decided to be fully present. "I'm listening," he said. "The utility truck has a differential rattle that needs to be addressed this week. The fluid levels on the third bay generator are borderline, and whoever is assigned this position needs to know that the commander's vehicle always needs to be processed within 48 hours of a request, or the aid will escalate up the chain unnecessarily. The coffee maker needs a new heating element from the supply depot in Building 7. Requisition number is on the third page of the pad." She paused. "The vehicles will tell you what they need if you listen to them instead of waiting for them to break. The people will tell you what they need if you watch them instead of waiting for them to complain." Reyes was absorbing all of this with the focused concentration of someone who understood that the information density was high and the time was short. "I don't understand why today," he said when she stopped. "You don't need to," she said. "I know I don't need to." He met her eyes. "I'm asking anyway." She looked at him. In 8 months, she had watched him develop from a young man who had technical skill and good instincts and insufficient confidence in both into something more. He had started asking questions in the right order. He had started making assessments before he asked for them. He had started trusting what he observed. She had noticed this. She had not said anything because saying something would have made him self-conscious about the development, and self-consciousness was the enemy of organic growth. But she had noticed. "The work I do here," she said carefully, "sometimes creates requirements that don't follow the standard schedule." He looked at her. "The truck," he said, "the night before last." She did not confirm. She did not deny. She held his gaze with the particular steady attention that she gave to things she respected. "You're going to be fine," she said. "You're going to be better than fine. You are good at this work, Reyes, not just the mechanical part, the whole thing, the listening part, the watching part, the showing up at 0712 every morning and being exactly where you're needed." She paused. "Don't let anyone tell you that's not enough, because from where I'm standing, it's everything." He was quiet. "I was holding it together with the particular effort of someone who had not expected to feel what he was currently feeling and was not entirely sure what to do with it." "Call your mother Sunday," she said. He blinked. He almost smiled. "Yes, Sergeant Carter," he said. She went back to the legal pad. He went to the utility truck. He started on the differential. The signals intelligence report had moved faster than Voss had predicted. By 1,003 hours, it had reached a desk in a building in Washington that Emily had been inside exactly once 9 years ago during a briefing that had been classified so comprehensively that the building itself did not appear on civilian mapping software. The desk belonged to a deputy director whose name did not appear in any public record and who had spent 31 years ensuring that the gap between what the public understood about American national security operations and what was actually true remained navigable. His name was Harold Cross, and he was 67 years old, and he had the specific quality of patience that came from spending 3 decades understanding that most problems, if you gave them enough time and enough structure, resolved themselves into something manageable. He read the signals report twice. He read the intelligence sweep report. He read the protocol Valkyrie activation notification. He read the satellite imagery analysis. He set all of it down. He picked up a phone that connected to a secure line. "Get me Voss," he said. The call to Voss lasted 4 minutes. What Cross said in those 4 minutes was not as Voss had half expected a reprimand. It was not a demand for explanation. It was not the kind of institutional pushback that she had been bracing for since she had seen the signals report. What Cross said was, "The SEAL commander filed a supplemental report this morning." Voss had not known this. "Rourke," Cross said. "He submitted it directly to my office. which tells me someone gave him my contact information, which tells me this community is smaller and more connected than even I account for sometimes. A pause. The report describes the extraction in operational detail. It describes the operator's methodology, decision-making, and performance. It describes the result. Another pause. Rourke is one of the most credible operators currently serving. His reports don't contain editorializing. They contain assessment. What did the assessment say, Voss asked. He said, and I'm quoting directly, the operator demonstrated a level of autonomous operational capability that I have not previously observed in a single-person deployment. The mission outcome was achieved through a combination of technical expertise, tactical precision, and a quality of judgment under pressure that is, in my professional assessment, exceptional by any metric I am qualified to apply. The United States military is fortunate to have this person. I recommend that whatever arrangement enables her to function in this capacity be protected and continued. Voss was quiet. He recommended protection of the arrangement, she said. He did, Cross said, which means he understood without being briefed that the arrangement was unconventional and that unconventional arrangements are fragile. He's right, Voss said. I know he's right, Cross said, which is why I'm calling you to tell you that the signals report has been reclassified at a level that effectively removes it from the investigation chain. The signals officer's report will be redirected. The 4 people who saw the original report have been briefed on classification requirements. A pause. The trail ends here. Voss exhaled. The 12-hour window, she said. Extended, Cross said. Take the 48. Do it right. Thank you, Harold. Don't thank me, he said. Thank Rourke. He did the thing that I could not have asked for and would not have known to ask for. Another pause. He went to bat for someone he met in the dark on a mountain and doesn't even know the full name of. Voss thought about this. Some people understand the whole thing just by being inside it, she said. Apparently, Cross said. Now go manage your asset, Margaret. He ended the call. Voss sat in the stillness of her retired life, the quiet house, the window with the view she had chosen specifically because it was nothing like any view she had ever had from an office. And she thought about a diner outside Fort Benning, about a 24-year-old woman who had said yes with the calm certainty of someone who had already known what her answer would be. She picked up the secure device. She sent Emily one more message. 48 hours restored. Someone went to bat. More soon. She set the device down. She looked out the window. Emily read the message from Voss and sat with it for a full minute before she allowed herself to process what it meant. It meant 48 hours restored. Someone went to bat. She thought about who had the access and the standing and the specific understanding of what was at stake. She thought about who had seen enough in that dark holding room and on that mountain to understand the architecture without being briefed on it. She thought about Rourke. 17 years in special operations. A man who understood that the covenant worked in both directions, who had said, trust me, and trusted back, who had filed a supplemental report to someone she could not name and could not have identified on behalf of a woman he knew only as Carter. She set the device down. She looked at the motor pool. She had 37 hours more than she had thought she had. She picked up the wrench. Briggs came back at 12:19. This time he came without the weight of the previous morning's visit. He came with coffee, 2 cups, which was a gesture so specific that it could only have been intentional, and he set one beside Emily's workbench without asking if she wanted it. She looked at it. She looked at him. Sit down, sir, she said. He sat on the crate. She kept working. The generator she was servicing needed her hands even if it did not need her full attention, and she had found long ago that some conversations went better when her hands were occupied. Less performance pressure. More truth. The investigation closed, he said. I know, she said. Delaney came to see me this morning, he paused. She told me she had followed a thread as far as she could and then hit a wall and had made a professional judgment call to file the outcome as inconclusive. That was the right call, Emily said. It was, he said. She's a good officer. He drank his coffee. She also said something else. Emily looked up briefly, looked back down. She said she didn't know what had happened, but that whatever had happened had been done right, and that done right was sufficient for her. He paused. Those were her exact words. Done right was sufficient. Emily thought about Delaney. The 4 hours and 54 minutes it had taken her to find the thread. The deliberate decision to close the inquiry, the language of the report independent assets may have contributed to the outcome. The professional restraint of someone who understood that some rooms had walls for reasons. She's going to be excellent at whatever she does next, Emily said. I suspect so, Briggs said. They were quiet together. The generator hummed. I heard from Colonel Voss, Briggs said. Emily went still, then continued working. She briefed me this morning, he said, not fully, appropriate to my clearance level, which apparently is sufficient for the basics but not the specifics. He paused. She told me what Rourke did. Emily did not respond. You know he filed a report, Briggs said. I suspected, she said. He went directly over 4 command levels to get it somewhere it would matter, Briggs said. That's not something people do. That's not something the system makes easy or comfortable. He paused. He did it anyway. Emily kept hands moving. The generator's service points were familiar to her, and familiarity meant she could hold 2 things at once, the physical work and the emotional weight that was building in the room. Why are you telling me this, sir? She asked. Briggs looked at his coffee cup. Because I spent 30 years in this uniform, he said, and I have been in many rooms with many people who did remarkable things and never told anyone about them. And I have been in fewer rooms where someone who had been helped by one of those remarkable things turned around and made sure the world knew, or at least the right parts of the world knew, that the remarkable thing had happened. He looked at her. Rourke didn't have to do that. He did it anyway. And I think you should know. Emily set down the tool. She picked up the coffee cup. She drank from it. It was actually good coffee. Briggs had brought it from somewhere that wasn't the motor pool coffee maker, which meant he had put thought into this visit. It matters to you that I know, she said. Not a question. Yes, he said simply. She thought about that. She thought about all the things that had happened in the past 48 hours. The 6 people on the mountain, the truck through the gate, the 9-day debrief that she kept behind a locked door, the motor pool that had been a stage and a practice and a choice made daily, the pack case in the storage compartment, the legal pad with the handoff notes, Reyes working on the differential. All of it connected, all of it part of the same long thing that had started in a diner 11 years ago. It matters to me too, she said. Briggs nodded. He finished his coffee. He stood. The base is going to be worse at vehicle maintenance after you leave, he said. She almost smiled. Tell that to Reyes. Reyes is good, Briggs said. Not as good as you. He will be, she said. He just needs time to stop doubting what he already knows. Briggs looked at her for a moment. Is that what it took for you too? He asked. She thought about the woman in the diner, about 4 years of training and deployments, about the 9 days in the debrief room, about 3 years and 4 months in the motor pool. Something like that, she said. He offered his hand. She shook it, firm. 2 people who had decided to trust each other without the benefit of time or explanation across the distance of rank and information and everything that military structure put between people. Good luck, Carter, he said. Thank you, sir, she said. He left. She turned back to the generator. Rodriguez came back. Emily heard the asymmetric footstep pattern before she saw her and thought, of course. Rodriguez came to the workbench and stood there, and this time she had something in her hand, a piece of paper folded once. From Rourke, she said. Emily looked at the paper. She looked at Rodriguez. He didn't come himself, Emily said. He said you'd prefer it this way, Rodriguez said. He said, and I'm quoting, that some people communicate better through things they've had time to write than things they have to say out loud. And that he thought you were probably one of those people. Emily held the paper for a moment. He's not wrong, she said. She unfolded it. The handwriting was the kind that came from years of field notes. Clear, efficient, slightly compressed, the writing of someone who had learned to communicate maximum information in minimum space. It said, Carter, I have been in this job long enough to know the difference between what gets reported and what actually happened. I know what you did on that mountain. I know what it cost to do it alone, and I know why you chose alone. I filed what I could file to the person who could do something with it. Whether it helped or not, I don't know. But it was the right thing and I did it. What you did on that mountain was the right thing and you did it. Some debts cannot be repaid. This is my best version of trying anyway. Rourke. Emily read it once. She folded it. She held it. Rodriguez was watching her with those direct eyes. He's a good man, Emily said. He's the best I've worked for, Rodriguez said, and I've worked for 3. Emily put the note in her breast pocket. Rodriguez watched her do it. You're leaving, Rodriguez said. Not a question. She had read the motor pool the same way she had read the holding room, with the observational precision of someone trained to absorb environments. Reassignment, Emily said, went 47 hours. Rodriguez nodded slowly. She looked around the motor pool. She took it in the way you took in a place when you understood it was going to be a memory soon. Will you do it again, Rodriguez asked. Whatever it is you do. Emily thought about Voss's voice on the phone, about hospitals and facilities management and broken things in a different form, about the same architecture in a different location. Yes, she said. Good, Rodriguez said. Simple, final. The word of someone who understood that the continuity of certain things was necessary and was relieved to know the continuity was assured. Take care of your shoulder, Emily said. 6 weeks, Rodriguez said. 8, Emily said. Rodriguez almost smiled. 7.5. Rodriguez? Yeah. You're going to be fine, Emily said. Better than fine. Rodriguez looked at her. I know, she said. Not arrogance. Statement. The confidence of someone who had survived something and come out the other side, understanding what they were made of. She left. Emily put her hand briefly to her breast pocket. She felt the shape of the folded paper through the fabric. Then she went back to work. The motor pool was dark except for the work light above the bench where Emily was finishing the last entry on the handoff notes. She had been writing for 90 minutes. Vehicle by vehicle, system by system. The institutional knowledge of 3 years and 4 months distilled onto 12 pages of yellow legal pad paper written for a person she did not know yet in a language that was technical on the surface and personal underneath. At the bottom of the 12th page, she wrote the work matters. Every vehicle you fix carries a person somewhere. That person is counting on you without knowing they're counting on you. That's not a burden. That's the whole thing. She set down the pen. She looked at the 12 pages. She clipped them together. She left them centered on the workbench where whoever came next would find them. She turned off the work light. She stood in the dark motor pool for the last time. She listened to it. Not for anything specific, just the particular silence of a place that had been many things to her simultaneously, a stage, a practice, a discipline, a choice, a home in the way that places become homes when you choose them fully enough. Enough. She had chosen it. Every day for 3 years and 4 months she had chosen it. That was not nothing. That was the opposite of nothing. She thought about this conversation with Voss, about hospitals and facilities management, about broken things in a new form. She thought about what Briggs had said, done right was sufficient. She thought about what Rodriguez had said, good. She thought about Rourke's handwriting compressed and clear, I know what it cost. She thought about Reyes, who would come in at 0712 tomorrow and find the legal pad on the workbench in the motor pool without her in it, and who would read the 12 pages and then go to work because that was who he was becoming. She thought about the utility truck with the differential that he was already fixing. She thought about 6 people breathing air on the right side of a mountain. She thought about 48 hours that had started as 12 and become 48 because someone she barely knew had filed a report on her behalf. She thought about the specific shape of trust, how it moved in directions you could not predict, how it arrived from where you least expected, but how it sustained things that could not sustain themselves. She walked to the door. She stopped. She turned back once. She looked at the coffee maker, the broken one, the one that produced bad coffee that nobody expected to be good. She thought about what she had told Reyes. Some things are more valuable broken than fixed, because the broken version doesn't create expectations that have to be managed. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she walked to it. She opened the panel on the side. She worked for 4 minutes with tools she knew by feel in the dark. She closed the panel. She walked away. She did not check whether it worked. She left the motor pool. The door closed behind her. In the morning, Reyes would come in at 0712 and find the legal pad on the workbench. He would pour water into the coffee maker and press the switch the way he had pressed it every morning for 8 months with the specific low expectation of someone accustomed to disappointment. And the coffee maker would work. I would stand there holding the good coffee and looking at the 12 pages of handoff notes in the motor pool without her in it, and he would not fully understand why he felt what he felt which was the particular mixture of loss and gratitude in forward motion that people feel when someone who shaped them has moved on. He would drink the good coffee. He would read the notes. He would go to work. Because that was what you did. You showed up. You fixed what was broken. You left things better than you found them. You trusted the person who came after you with what you had learned. And sometimes if you were paying attention, you understood that the most ordinary looking things around you were carrying the most extraordinary weight. Emily walked through the base under stars she would not see again from this particular angle toward the bunk she had 23 hours left to sleep in, carrying everything she was and everything she had been, and everything she was about to become. The mechanic, the operator, the woman who had learned that those two things were not opposites. They were the same choice made in different clothes. She walked, the base breathed around her. 36 hours. The new assignment was waiting. The broken things she had not yet found were waiting. She was already thinking about them. Reyes came in exactly on time. He always came in exactly on time. That was one of the things Emily had noted on the third page of the legal pad. Reyes is reliable in the way that matters most, which is that he shows up before he is ready and becomes ready by showing up. Trust that about him. He poured water into the coffee maker. He pressed the switch. He turned to pick up the legal pad from the workbench and stopped. The coffee maker made a sound, a different sound than it had made for 8 months, a correct sound. He turned back slowly. The indicator light was on. The heating element was working. The carafe was filling with coffee that smelled like actual coffee rather than the industrial approximation of coffee that had become the motor pool's ambient scent since before he arrived. He stood there for a long moment. He looked at the empty motor pool, at the vehicles in their positions, at the hydraulic lifts, at the shelving units organized with a precision that was going to take him months to fully understand. He looked at the coffee maker. He poured a cup. He drank it. It was good. He sat down on the oil filter crate and read all 12 pages of the legal pad without stopping. And by the time he finished, he understood two things clearly. The first was that he had been given more than handoff notes. He had been given a philosophy. The second was that the person who had written it was not coming back. He set the legal pad down. He looked at the utility truck. He had finished the differential yesterday. It no longer rattled. He stood up. He went to work. 1,400 miles away in a regional hospital that served a mid-sized American city that was not remarkable in any way that attracted attention. A new facilities maintenance technician reported for her first shift at 06:30. Her name on the employment record was Ellen Carr. She was quiet, capable. Her hands looked like they knew tools. She did not make conversation beyond what the job required. She remembered everyone's name. She remembered nothing that required her to be memorable. Her supervisor, a man named Gerald, who had been running hospital maintenance for 19 years and had seen every variety of technician system produced, walked her through the facility with the practiced efficiency of someone whose orientation to her had been refined by repetition. He showed her the HVAC systems, the electrical panels, the backup generators, the plumbing infrastructure, the medical equipment, maintenance schedules. He talked while he walked. She listened with the complete attention of someone absorbing information that they intended to use rather than information they intended to file away. At the end of the tour, he stopped. He looked at her. "Any questions?" he said. She had been asking precise technical questions throughout the tour. Good ones. The kind that told him she already understood the systems and was asking about the gaps between them, the places where failures lived. But now she was quiet for a moment. "The backup generator on the east wing," she said. "When was the last full load test?" Gerald blinked. "We test quarterly." "When was the last one?" He thought about it. 11 weeks ago. "The next scheduled test is in 1 week," she said. "That's right. I'd like to run it today," she said. The fuel line connection on the secondary coupling showed surface oxidation. It's within tolerance, but at the edge of tolerance. And if it fails during an actual outage, it affects the ICU, Gerald said. "And the surgical suites," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that 19 years of assessing technicians had calibrated. "Run the test," he said. "Thank you," she said. She went to fix what needed fixing before anyone knew it was broken. Gerald watched her go. He thought good hire. He had no idea. 6 weeks after the mountain, Rodriguez cleared her first physical therapy milestone 4 days ahead of schedule. She did not tell anyone. She marked it privately in the way she marked most things, by doing the next thing on the list without ceremony. But that night in her quarters, she wrote a letter. She had been writing letters since she was 9 years old, when her grandmother had told her that some things were too important for phone calls. Her grandmother had been right about most things and had been particularly right about that. The letter was addressed to Carter, and she had no address to send it to, which meant she wrote it and kept it, which was also something her grandmother had taught her. Some letters are for the person you're writing to. Some letters are for the person you become by writing them. She wrote, "I went back to work today. Not full duty yet, but the kind of back to work it tells you the rest of it is all coming. I thought about what you said, that I kept going on the mountain with the shoulder and the dark and the 40 men, and that this was the same thing. I didn't believe you when you said it. I believe you now. The same thing in different clothes. I think that's what it always is." She wrote, "I don't know where you are. I don't know what you're doing, but I know you're doing it, and I know you're doing it right because you don't know any other way." That's not a compliment. That's just the thing I know about you. She wrote, "I hope whoever you're being right now is someone you chose. That's the part that matters. You told me that. You didn't say it directly, but you said it. The choice made every day. The ordinary thing that isn't ordinary." She set down her pen. She folded the letter. She kept it. In the morning, she went to physical therapy. She was 4 days ahead. By the end of the week, she would be 7. The twist that nobody saw coming happened on a Tuesday. It was 8 weeks after the mountain. 7 weeks and 4 days after Emily had become Ellen Carr in a regional hospital in a mid-sized American city. 3 weeks after she had identified and repaired a fault in the hospital's primary electrical distribution panel that the contracted maintenance company had missed on 4 consecutive quarterly inspections. 2 weeks after she had quietly restructured the backup power protocol so that a failure in any single system would not cascade into the ICU's monitoring equipment. The hospital was more functional than it had been in 11 years, though nobody had said this aloud because nobody was measuring it in a way that produced a number they could point to. It was the kind of improvement that showed up in the absence of failures rather than the presence of successes. On that Tuesday morning, a woman came to the hospital, not as a patient. She walked through the front entrance with the particular directness of someone who had been here before and knew exactly where she was going. She was 63 years old, silver-haired, a civilian coat over a posture that had never fully shed 30 years of military bearing. She went to the facilities management department. She asked for Ellen Carr. The receptionist paged the maintenance floor. 4 minutes later, Emily came up from the lower level with a diagnostic tablet in her hand and grease on her left thumb, in the particular focused expression of someone who had been in the middle of something. She saw Voss. She stopped. In 11 years, Margaret Voss had come to her directly exactly twice. The first time was a diner outside Fort Benning. The second time was right now. Neither visit had been casual. Emily said, "What happened?" Voss said, "Nothing bad. Come with me." They found a family waiting room that was empty at that hour. They sat across from each other in chairs designed for comfort, and the comfort felt slightly wrong for the kind of conversation they were about to have, but neither of them acknowledged it. "Rourke's team deployed last week," Voss said. "New operation, different theater." "I know," Emily said. She had tracked it through channels she was not supposed to still have access to, and that Voss had not revoked, which meant Voss knew she was tracking and had decided to allow it. "Rodriguez cleared full duty 3 weeks ago." 4 days early, Voss said. 7 by the end of that week, Emily said. Voss almost smiled. "I should stop being surprised by what you know." "What happened, Margaret?" Emily said. She used the first name. She almost never used the first name. It meant she needed the full truth, not the version calibrated for operational efficiency. Voss looked at her steadily. "Harold Cross is retiring," she said. "End of the year. He's been the architecture of Protocol Valkyrie for 19 years. When he goes, the program goes through a formal review." She paused. "Some people want to expand it. More operators, more cover positions, broader geographic distribution. And some people want to close it," Emily said. "Some people have always wanted to close it," Voss said. "The mountain gave those people less ammunition than they expected. Rourke's report neutralized most of the institutional resistance." She paused. "But the review is coming, and the review will require testimony from active protocol operators about operational outcomes in current deployment status." Emily held this. You need me to testify, she said. Not formally, Voss said. A classified briefing. 3 people. Cross his successor in the oversight committee chair. She paused. I need you to tell them what you are, what the work is, what it costs and what it produces. Emily was quiet. She looked at her hands, the grease on her left thumb, the diagnostic tablet she had set on the chair beside her. She thought about the ICU on the floor above them, about the backup generator running clean since she had replaced the oxidized coupling, about the electrical panel that no longer had a fault nobody had noticed. She thought about 6 people breathing. She thought about Reyes drinking good coffee. She thought about Rodriguez 7 days ahead going back to work. She thought about what it meant to tell 3 people in a classified room what she was. Not the operational details. Those were already documented. What she was. The choice made every day. The ordinary thing that was not ordinary. When she said, 3 weeks, Voss said. Emily nodded. Okay, she said. Voss looked at her. Just okay? What else would it be? Emily said. Voss held her gaze for a moment. And then something happened that had happened only one other time in 11 years in a debrief room on the 9th day of 9 days. Voss let her face do what it actually wanted to do instead of what the professional register required of it. What it did was this: it looked at Emily Carter with the full weight of knowing her. Not Shadow, not the operator, not the cover. All of it together, the whole accumulated thing, 11 years of it. I am glad every day. Voss said that you said yes in that diner. Emily felt the weight of it land. She did not deflect it. She did not minimize it. She had spent 3 years in a motor pool learning that some things were more valuable when you let them be what they were. So am I, she said. They sat there for a moment in a hospital waiting room, 2 women who had spent decades in the space between what the world saw and what was actually true, and let the quiet be enough. Then Emily picked up her tablet. I have a boiler on the 3rd floor that's been running 2 degrees outside optimal, she said. If I don't address it today, it'll affect the heating in the pediatric wing by Thursday. Voss looked at her. Go fix it, she said. Emily stood. She went. She took the stairs because the elevator was slower and the boiler needed her, and that was the whole calculation, the only calculation, the same one it had always been. Find the broken thing. Fix it before it becomes a crisis. Leave the system better than you found it. She pushed through the stairwell door. She went up. Above her, a hospital full of people who did not know her name continued the business of being alive, which was the most fragile and the most ordinary thing in the world, and which required more than almost anything else someone paying attention to the systems that kept it running. Emily Carter had been paying attention for 11 years. She was not done. The work was never done, and that was exactly how she wanted it.